We're taking an entry from the Peter system today in the aftermath of attacks by the Islamic State of Quan on Iran and more recently on Russia. I was requested to do a geopolitics of ISIS video. So here we go. Couple things to keep in mind. First of all, ISIS and ISIS Khorasan are two very different groups. So I can do a geopolitics of ISIS. ISIS's core power is in the middle Feral Clarent between western Syria and central Iraq. So basically you've got the Euphrates Valley that goes from the Persian Gulf up through central Iraq into western Iraq, northern Iraq, then comes back down to the cities of Hamama and Aleppo. That is the zone that technology and people and ideas and trade have percolated back and forth through a lot of human history, especially the earlier days. And in that zone, the thing to remember is that the crescent is very, very, very thin. While you do have Mesopotamia in the east where the Tigris comes into play, and the zone between the rivers is a major agricultural zone, and while you do have more rainfall in extreme western Syria, when the Lebanon mountains merge with the highlands that eventually become Anatolia, in the middle, you only have the Euphrates, and even in modern days with industrial level technology, in many cases the green belt where you can grow food in the central Euphrates region is only a few miles from north to south. And because of that, they've never been able to develop kind of the dense population centers because there's never enough food production. And the zones that you can do something with are very, very skinny and very, very long, which makes it very difficult to patrol it. So think about this way. If your city was half a mile wide but 20 miles long, and the proportion are much worse for Iraq, if wherever your police station is getting all the way down and all the way back would be difficult. You want something that's spread out from a central point like, say a Chicago or Houston or Dallas or most of our cities. It just makes a civilizational penetration much more difficult, and eventually you hit the hard desert where you can't do anything. So this is the zone that ISIS is from. Water is limited. There's only one source aside from the oases, and either you control it or you don't. And so geopolitics of that region tend to be very and very desperate. And this is part of the reason why ISIS is so violent, because it is a battle for survival among groups every single day now. It also means that groups like ISIS are not long for this world if you look at the region from a broader perspective. If you go further west, you hit the Levant, which has powers like Israel and the core of Syria. If you go north, you get into Anatolia and the Turkish territories, and if you go east, you get into Mesopotamia, which has been a cradle of civilization for quite some time. This zone in the middle can't do anything, and the zone in the middle has never been powerful enough to penetrate into any of those other three zones. So the only time this zone in the middle matters at all is when all three of those major areas are offline at the same time. And if you go back to ISIS's heyday 105 years ago, that's exactly where we were. Syria was in a civil war that the central government had almost lost. Iraq was reeling from the effects of the American occupation, was not able to patrol its own territory, much less things on its fringes, and the Turks had not yet re-emerged from their century-long self-imposed geopolitical sleep. It was a very different situation. And so ISIS was able to form, recruit, expand, dominate groups, and basically go on a series of small genocides. It was pretty nasty. Now that's not our situation. The Syrian government has, for the most part, stabilized even if the civil war is not quite over. The Turks are back in the game and are crossing the border regularly, and Iraq is a power worthy of its name again. And so ISIS has basically fallen from controlling territory to just a few outposts that move around as a general insurgency in some of the least valuable property in the Middle East. So that's ISIS. ISIS Khorasan is different. ISIS Khorasan thinks that ISIS is a bunch of wimps because they don't kill enough people, specifically Shia. ISIS is primarily Sunni, ISIS Khorasan as well, and they see Shia as the worst apostates of all. And so they are not interested in holding territory, they are interested in taking the battle wherever it may go and wherever there's a secular government. And so that has taken them against the Taliban, which they think are a bunch of foes. That's taken them against the Iranians who are Shia, and that's taken them against the Russians who they see as oppressing their fellow Sunni followers. Because of this, you can't do geopolitics with ISIS Khorasan, because they're not interested in territory. They don't have a home territory. They're actually fairly egalitarian as to who they take into their ranks, as long as you're not a Shia. And in the case of the Russian space, there are a lot of subjugated Muslim populations, with probably the Uzbeks being the most important, that are willing to join violent groups. And so, one of the things that it appears to be with ISIS Khorasan is they've been recruiting pretty Welcome to this deep dive into the geopolitical situation in the former Soviet sphere. The vast expanse of the former Soviet Union, stretching from the frigid steppes of Siberia to the sun-soaked shores of the Black Sea, is a kaleidoscope of nations, each with its unique cultural fabric and geopolitical aspirations. Within this vast landscape, the Russian Federation stands as the most prominent successor state of the former Soviet Union, wielding considerable influence over a diverse range of ethnic groups including Tajiks, Kyrgyz, Turkmen, Dagestanis, Bashirs, and Tatars. However, beneath the surface of this apparent unity, tensions simmer. The primary concern for the Russians is not just territorial integrity, but also ideological unity. The specter of splinter groups, driven more by ideology than territorial ambitions, constantly looms over the region. Consider the case of ISIS, an ideological splinter group that has managed to carve out a footprint in the Middle East. While they have yet to expand beyond their current territory, their ideological influence is a concern. However, the group's lack of a core territory means their geopolitical impact is limited. In contrast, groups within the former Soviet sphere are not constrained by the absence of a core territory. The danger they pose is twofold. They threaten Russia's security and challenge its ideological hegemony. In summary, the geopolitical situation in the former Soviet sphere is complex and fraught with tension. The Russian Federation, despite being the most powerful successor state of the Soviet Union, grapples with security and ideological challenges. The presence of ideological splinter groups, unlike ISIS, is a genuine concern due to their potential to destabilize the region. Yet it is essential to remember that geopolitical landscapes are not static. They evolve, influenced by a multitude of factors ranging from internal politics to international relations. Therefore, keeping an eye on the developments in the former Soviet sphere is not just a matter of academic interest, but a necessity for anyone interested in understanding the dynamics of global politics. Remember, the world of geopolitics is a constantly shifting landscape, and the former Soviet sphere is no different. So stay informed, stay curious, and stay engaged.